The philosopher and the theologian, the commentator, appear after a long period where Aristotle was totally ignored. Aristotle, in fact, was commented in late antiquity by Neoplatonians. One simply couldn't find Aristotelians in late antiquity to comment the works of the philosophers. And so the best commentators, let us say Alexander of Aphrodisias, were Neoplatonists. Now, something will happen with the appearance of the entry of the philosopher and the commentator. It's an entity called scientia. Not science, but scientia. This was roughly unknown before, but it was called to a bright future. Scientia is true knowledge, genuine knowledge, and so on. And Aquinas, one of the brightest masters of the newly founded University of Paris, Aquinas will even borrow from the philosopher Aristotle the concept of science, but subordinate science. A subordinate or subalternate science is a science which borrows its principles from another science. For us, it may sound that the hierarchy of hard sciences, starting with pure a priori sciences, logic, then mathematics, then applied mathematics, then theoretical mathematics, etc. Now, in the case of Aquinas, the example he gives is the example of music, because music borrows its principles from arithmetics. And Aquinas, who will never say that he is a theologian, and who speaks not of theology but of a sacred doctrine, Aquinas, who is nonetheless an almost believer Aristotelian, to use the theory of subordinate sciences to precise the status of theology. And theology, I mean our theology, the theology practiced by people at the Sorbonne, borrows its principles from the knowledge of God by the angels and the saints in heaven. I dislike the analogy, but nonetheless, it's what you find in the texts. I've started with Aquinas, but I ought not to. For when some bishops decided to gather all the available knowledge under one single roof, precisely they were gathering philosophy, theology, law, canon law, civil law, medicine. These universities were small, of course, in the beginning. They became very large very quickly, just because a good university was attracting good students. Anyway, the university was divided. It was divided between faculties. So there was a faculty of law, a faculty of theology, and a faculty of philosophy, and other faculties. And there, for the first time, we find clear labels. On one door at the Sorbonne was written Faculty of Philosophy. Some other door you would find Faculty of Theology. All of a sudden, philosophy and theology do exist. I mean, I'm no nominalist. My point is not to say that to exist they have to be named. But in the history of institutions, The game is always precisely to create things by giving them names. And in this case, it worked perfect. It worked perfectly, and it started the history of philosophy on one side, independent, and the history of theology on the other side. Now, I must have said a couple of almost enthusiastic words about monastic theology. It was the end of it. And a very minor fact went to my knowledge some time ago. In the second half of the 13th century, so the Sorbonne was 30 years old then, a powerful Benedictine abbot, Hugh of Lexington, the great man in his order, decided the creation in Paris, a few yards from the Sorbonne, of a convent, in order that young monks may learn these young, new, fashionable things being called scholastic theology and philosophy. And that was the end. That was the end because theology, as taught in monastic circles till the French Revolution, was a scholastic theology. And because theology as taught in monastic circles in Europe after the Napoleonic Wars and the monastic refoundation which follows, was also and is also neo-scholastic. So, here we are facing a landscape with philosophers, theologians, and many other extremely interesting people who, I'm afraid, won't interfere because they will never have any problem of coexistence with philosophers and theologians. Coexistence in today's academy is a global fact, and therefore inviting a mathematician to speak on the mathematical infinite is something the faculty of theology will do very easily. But we are used to it. In smaller universities with smaller faculties, no, interdisciplinary simply does not exist. It's a modern fact.